Welcome to Potentiality, a space for big questions, deep conversations, and shared wisdom around the most meaningful thing we do as human beings, which is how we parent and educate the next generation. My guest today is Zachary Reznichek, a longtime educator and lifelong tabletop gamer who has spent over 20 years discovering how the architecture of role-playing games can become a profound vehicle for human development. With a master's in education and deep training in mindfulness, Zach is the author of the Teacher Gamer Handbook and the co-author of the Da Vinci Life Skills Curriculum. And through his Teacher Gamer certification program, he has trained educators around the world to use immersive storytelling and world building to help young people develop resilience, empathy, critical thinking, and a genuine sense of agency. His work, now piloted in schools in Quebec, the Caribbean, the UK, and different locations across Southeast Asia, shows what becomes possible when play is treated not as an escape from learning, but as one of the truest forms of it. I'm so happy to welcome you to Potentiality, Zach.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to be here.
Thank you. I've been really looking forward to this conversation, knowing all the incredible work that you do around the world. And I want to I want to start by asking more about your personal story and how you got to do the work that you're doing. You have spent over 20 years immersed in role-playing games before turning that love into life skills curriculum. Can you take us back to the beginning? What was about these games that first captured you as a young person?
Well, I think that they captured me because I was a struggling young person, and I had just gone to a new school, and I saw some kids playing this game, which looked very strange because they had pictures and maps and text, and they had these. They looked like gems to me, but they were dice, and they had figures and pencils and paper, and it was this whole thing. And they were outside against the wall at school on a break, and I was new, and I saw them playing it, and I uh, just was so curious as one is. And I was 10 years old. This was 1982. So this is like very new. I mean, it was a new thing, and I guess one of the parents, had introduced it to one of the kids or as something like this. And and my first experience was very tragic actually because I started to play the game. Immediately I was given a character because I was very curious and they said, "Hey, you want to join us and play?" And they were I was so excited. And it's a game that's a simulation, right? So it's a simulation of a kind of life or an experience. And in this case, it's an adventure. And in this adventure, I got greedy because I was proposed that there was a treasure chest full of treasure in the water, and we were arriving on an island. And I decided that I would jump in and grab the treasure. I wasn't necessarily thinking about the treasure for me. I was thinking about the treasure for everybody. But I jumped in and I had too much armor on, and my character drowned. And this happened, I'm telling you, within 5 or 10 minutes of sitting down to play with these new friends. And I jumped back and tears were almost falling out of my eyes. I was because I had lost the game. I thought I lost friends. I totally blew it. And I ran away and I went home and I was crying and I cried myself to sleep and my parents didn't know what to do. And it was the very next day when I went back and I felt so shy. And then one of the kids says, "Hey, you want to keep playing with us?" And I said, "I thought I lost." And he said, "No, no, no, you're just gonna make another character. And do you want to come to my house this weekend and we can play more?" And I was like, "Oh my, yes." And so it's like a resolved trauma within 24 hours that really kicked off something that deeply touched me in a way that was profound. And this idea of playing a character, a game that persists or continues, there aren't really points. You're not trying to win against other people, so it's non-competitive and it's collaborative. And so I think that all of these various elements were really interesting to me as a person who otherwise grew up in a very competitive environment and and where everybody, even early on, young kids hear things like, got to go to college and you got to get a great job and money, and you're hearing all these things and you're trying to put them all together. And I felt like through role-playing games, I got a different view of life and a different perspective about playing roles and about collaborating and kind of finding your place, but also trying to gain skills and get better at things and find things and discover things and keep your curiosity and go on adventure. So this was really something that later on in education, I thought, ooh, this is there's such a huge opportunity. There are so many opportunities that when I got the chance, I started to introduce them in schools.
That is absolutely amazing. Just, I think the opportunity that it creates for exploration and self-discovery. I think that's what you're speaking to, and how you relate with people, like the points of connection and just really finding yourself. I think that you very eloquently spoke to that. And a lot of youth these days, at least from my experience, they really struggle with that because I feel like we've minimized the opportunities for play, particularly the type of gaming that you're speaking to. And the fact that you're bringing it back is really commendable and truly powerful. I'm really curious. You said like later, as an educator, I realized that I could bring this, but what was that defining moment? Like, what was there any specific moment that you said, okay, I can actually create a curriculum and teach youth this essential life skills through this type of methodology? Was there a specific defining moment or kind of evolved over time?
I think there's a little bit of both. I think the first thing was that as an English teacher, a high school English teacher, where really the core skill I'm trying to teach is understanding critical thinking, using literary forms, and the ability to write and to be able to write proposals and interviews and represent yourself and create stories and understand the world and be able to compare, what a text is to the world or to community or to the self. All the things that the regular English teacher is looking to do. I started to also try to figure out, what will calm people down, what will get people more focused. And this was mindfulness. So mindfulness was that was the first step for me where I started introducing mindfulness into the classroom, where it was the first thing that we did. And it just really got everybody to ground and focus and let go of whatever had happened outside that classroom before, whether it was coming to school or another class or whatever was going on socially, and then just focus on the material. And so this is what I was a first step. And then in another school, and I thought about role playing, and I was always introducing role playing and games to people. So games was always something, but I also was very reticent to use what's called gamification, which means that you're going to kind of decorate your curriculum with elements that are gamified. But I know as a gamer and as a person who works with kids and did my graduate studies in motivation, that if you're trying to trick people into doing something by just dressing it and putting a mask on it, they will look right through it and they will stop trusting you. So
Mhm.
I really was looking for opportunities in school and especially in high school to have authentic experiences, relationships, but also where I could put implicit learning. So I think that people really like to learn things and then realize that they learned them. So that was the kind of the way I think about games or about introducing things and or making puzzles out of activities. And it wasn't until I was in a school where there were trouble kids.
Mhm.
And I had experienced that also with the mindfulness was part of that too, where it was like the school was saying, "Oh, these kids are so out of control, and they're either dropping out or they're not finishing their classes or they're just sort of skipping along." And there was all this concern, and that's where the mindfulness was like, "Okay, let's focus those kids," and that succeeded. And then in the next school, it was, these kids, they're always disruptive to the other students. They don't like to take the opportunities that we're bringing to them that are, green based conservation. These were kind of like, let's say, kids that were considered kind of punk, and so it's like these are disruptive kids. What do we do with them? We want to have a 4-hour class every Wednesday where we can do really expansive project-based learning. But what do we do with these kids who, are just going to make a mess of everything and a mockery of everything? And I was like, I'll, you know, because I'm kind of already in that space of trying to figure out, what could I do? I like the
Mhm.
challenge. So I was like, I'll take them. And then I said, well, what do you want me to do with them? And they said, oh, we don't care. Just
Mm.
occupy them and just make sure that they just don't blunder into everything else and make a mess of things. I said, and just intuitively, because I was kind of waiting for this, like, well, could I teach them Dungeons and Dragons? And they were like, we don't care. Just do whatever you want. And then I thought, oh, great. Well, I've already been writing down curricula like how I would do this. Now I can, try it out and see what happens. And I think the other key element of this was this isn't going to be just like what you do on the weekend. Now, as a teacher who can provide homework, who can make this more rigorous, who can demand, assignments, as long as I have the buy-in from the students, and that was the next thing I needed to do, then I really had a class. And so that's what I did. I went around to the students, those students, and they were very marked, and I would go, hey, I think they're going to let me offer Dungeons and Dragons. They probably won't, but if they did, would you join the class? And they were like, yeah, I'd do that. And I said, okay. And then sure enough, it came around, offered the class, and they all took it. So it was like, and that was also nice because they didn't kind of know that they were getting gamed, right? They all came into the class together, unified, and then and I took them all, and it went so well that then, all of a sudden the other students are like, "Hey, I want to do that." Like how, and I was like, "Well, it's full, and next semester," and then it just started to go into rotation. So that's that. It was really triggered by usually what alternative methods need, which is that somebody is, they're wanting to try something new with a group.
That is fascinating. And the fact, I think there are so many different things that were crossing my mind, but there are a few points that I want to emphasize. First of all, you totally flipped the script on the way we approach learning. I know having been in public education for so many years, we tell the kids what they're going to learn, right? The objective is up there. And it's like, but you're really speaking of the awe and really the joy of having learned it. And then through reflection, it's like, oh, this is what I've learned, right? So it's a completely different process to approach learning that I think is way more human. And I think the fact that what you do works for every type of a child, even those who are completely disengaged and are labeled in some way, whether it's their behavior or academics, this engages even them because you're tapping into the fundamental human drive of learning through play. And that is really fascinating. And who does not like Dungeons and Dragons? My boy is creating a game that is called the Army of Dragons, and they're so into it, even though he's in his early 30s. So that's
Yeah.
kind of a universal. I really want to speak to the concept of the multiverse because anybody who goes onto your website, it's very, very clear the comprehensive approach that you have. You describe the multiverse as a metaphor, which is at the heart of your work, where the games simulate, like you said, this is all simulation, is the risk, the consequence of it, identity, collaboration for real life. Now, can you unpack that idea of the multiverse for us? And why is a fictional world sometimes a safer and more honest place to learn the truths about oneself and the world?
Thank you. Yes, it's the multiverse is well, it's kind of coming back to this idea in English class, like what is literary form? And metaphor is something that we use all the time when we talk about we could talk about how a fountain is related to our health, and it could be ever flowing, or it's just trickling and it's all brackish and it's in trouble, we can use metaphors to describe um, everything from a system, how I always say to the kids, so how is the internet in this room? Can you describe it as a metaphor? And they'll say, well, it's trickling in like mud dribbling down a rock because it's really slow, right? And then other people will say like, wow, it's coming in like a torrent, or it's coming in like a tsunami, like it's so fast. And I think getting people to realize that, in fact, we're using metaphors all the time. And we also grab metaphors from the world of Harry Potter, and we grab a metaphor from something that we've heard in TV show, or we notice that somebody uses some kind of poetry and brings it from a song. And so we're doing it all the time. And
Mhm.
to me, what was interesting was the only place I was really getting that was in English class as a kid. And it was helping me understand the world. And I felt like I could actually write whatever I want. So I could do creative writing. And that's something that I chose to do on my own in my own time. And I think that when introducing writing to kids and showing that there's this creative writing that you can do and you can expand on your ability of writing through creative writing, it kind of it gets you loosened up. It makes you feel
Mhm.
more aware of the power of words. And then when somebody asks you to do an assignment, it's then you're like, oh, right. So actually, when I use an analogy to describe how a certain scientific breakdown like photosynthesis works, suddenly I'm actually turning this process into a story, right? And so I think that kind of using metaphor is something that we already do. And now the multiverse is a place where we can make and look at the metaphor that is playing in a game world. So actually what we're doing is we're putting ourselves into a story with a certain identity.
Mhm.
There's a whole bunch of rules around the game and how those identity works, how risks get taken in the game, how we deal with the probability of succeeding or failing at taking those risks. And then that metaphor, again, implicitly filters into the person's mind, whether they're an adult, whether they're a child, it doesn't matter. It goes into your mind of, right, so my chances of doing whatever it is are either boosted by things
Mhm.
that support what I'm trying to do, or they are reduced or they are um, largely penalized by different circumstances. Those could be physical circumstances like it's slippery to it's difficult because it's too noisy, or
Mhm.
it could be that someone is trying to influence you and it's becoming difficult because you're being manipulated. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of different ways in which there's a little bit of noise outside. I might shut the window, but there's a little bit of there's an understanding that starts to trickle in that through the game. Otherwise, you have games for points and you're trying to, stack cards or you're trying to get to some destination and you're trying to win. But with a role-playing game, you're really kind of collaborating with others to solve a puzzle. And then you
Mhm.
sort of like, well, life is sort of that way too. I'm trying to graduate from this school. I'm trying to get into this other school. I want to become a veterinarian. I have goals. I have these things that I want to do. And so uh, there's a sort of informing through the experience of, well, what is it going to take? And what risks
Mhm.
will take? And what will be the things that will give me bonuses? And what will be the things that give me penalties, right? So that's the real metaphor that trickles in from reality or from the game into reality.
It's fascinating, and just really speaking, how multifaceted and multidimensional this approach is, because it's from the physical world to their emotions, the senses, the relationships. I mean, everything is really integrated, and that's what makes it so successful. It almost makes it an immersive experience, which is exactly what like human life is. I'm curious, Zach. I really want us to better understand the framework. And I know the framework has 36 distinct life skills, and they're organized into different strands like academic and aesthetic, makerspace, social emotional, like different domains. I'm curious, how did you arrive at that structure? And if there is a skill among them that you find young people need these days most, or maybe what is the most powerful and more impactful entry point among those skills, if there is such?
Okay. So the real quick answer to this is that again, I was offered an opportunity, which was, can you can you deal with these kids? And then it was, okay, I'll teach Dungeons and Dragons. And then it was, okay, how do I do that? And what will have impact? But what I also, so what that was speaking to was, what's the difficult that these kids are having? What's the
Mhm.
difficulty? They're having difficulty collaborating. They're having difficulty with the empathy to see around them, like what's happening. There's some collaboration issues. There's some communication issues. There's some bystander awareness that could probably be understood. There's some conflict resolution. All these things are going on in my mind, but largely what I really wanted for them was adaptability.
Mhm.
I wanted them to figure out, guys, how do you adapt into this? You might be on a rough road. And I actually remember having the same kind of experience as a kid, as being like, how do I adapt to this system that might not be for me, or might not be made in a way that's speaking to me, but I need to make it through because I want to do things. There's things that I want to do. And instead of becoming disenchanted, uh, and especially when I looked at these kids, these kids are great. They just need to find a way to connect. So it's like finding connection. Um, when I literally, what would be 5, 6 years later, when I looked back at and I started writing the Teacher Gamer Handbook, I was looking back to all the different programs in different schools that I worked in. And I looked at, this school said we want a course that engages in communication. This one, it's like about English literacy and creative writing. This one, it's about critical thinking. This one uh, is about awareness. And this one is about risk assessment. So I just started to like write these lists down because I was intuitively going into a school, listening to the issue like a consultant would do, right? I go
Mhm.
in,
Mhm.
what are the problems in your company, corporation, school, whatever it is, classroom, and then look at the stakeholders, understand the situation, and then say, okay, so let's figure out how to make a game with a story, and a story that addresses those ideas such that by the end of it, those skills will, first of all, be introduced. Second of all, be um, played with or explored. And then finally, they will be assessed, assuming that, and especially when it goes from no awareness at all to how far can we get, an awareness to happen. And then ultimately, how does that trickle into the person's ultimate awareness? And I think with life skills, not just literacy, although literacy is I, all part of it, I think the main thing around life skills is generating awareness of oneself and others. So this kind of empathy, and also self-awareness, but also risk assessment and realization of what my goals are. So understanding obstacles, right? Setting goals, understanding obstacles, and then figuring out what is the planning to get to the goal, and how do I work with those obstacles instead of hating those obstacles or being negative about those obstacles. How can I address them? How can I actually find help to overcome them? How can I get support? How do I learn how to ask for support? So these are the kind of things that for me, when trying to figure out how to grow a life skills program, I'm really, it was intuitive, and school after school, many of them continue to be the same ones, but then there'll be little things that will be tweaked. And then finally, this 36 life skills, 21 basic skills, and 15 advanced skills kind of just appeared. These are the things I'm
Mhm.
addressing.
Thank you so much for unpacking it. I'm listening to you as an educator at this point, and I'm thinking, if I am, let's say, in a public school system versus private or independent school versus after school, those are all very different structures. And I know you've had success in, different school systems. So I'm really curious if I'm, let's say, a public school educator, and I'm thinking, can I even make room for this? How would that apply in my setting? Because you spoke about adaptability. So I would like you to speak a little further about what does this curriculum offer maybe to a public school teacher working with a very packed, standardized schedule where time and autonomy are often the scarcest resources versus, let's say, on the other spectrum, let's say homeschooling and after school, where there is a lot more openness that, this can be made more tailored or customized to fit their needs. So, what would you say to teachers who live within public school, private school, maybe after school, homeschool? What does it offer to different types of settings?
So the difference between approaching or using the teacher gamer or a multiverse games curriculum in these different environments that you're talking about, um, they it started out with this idea that was very wholesome and holistic. I had an opportunity to take these kids in an environment where we could do project-based learning. So that was the idea.
Mm.
More and more schools are using project-based learning, so that's good. And so there's an immediate opportunity there. There's also more and more schools that are saying we want to take time for social emotional learning, and we recognize that a child who's becoming an adult needs the opportunity to find self-regulation. They need an opportunity to develop collaboration, empathy, and other kinds of uh, softer skills. I even
Mhm.
think some of them are hard skills, but skills that allow one to understand, especially how to fail and what that means to bring up or succeed, especially in a group setting and through creativity. So if it's a school system that just says we just do brick and mortar completely, we don't care about project-based learning, we don't care about social emotional learning, that's really challenging. I mean,
Mhm.
um, the best I could say about that is that you could create a literacy program where you're talking about writing and really get into the writing of that. You can generate, and I've generated lots of assignments that put together a kind of story through writing and assignments, and you can build something like that. It's still playful. It's still creative writing, but largely you're developing literacy, you're identifying literary forms, you're developing vocabulary. So there's that element. Again, very, very challenging. In project-based learning in general, there's always math. You're always going to be measuring, you're always
Mhm.
going to be budgeting, and you're always going to be scaling. And so this is also happening in Dungeons and Dragons and other RPGs. And again, it's not exclusive to Dungeons and Dragons. That is a major entry point for a lot of people. And also, I will just mention here that I use 3.5 edition Dungeons and Dragons largely because it's much more skills heavy. It's also much more micromanaged, and it's a lot less superhero-y. Like I'm not interested in a simulator of superheroes, which is
Mhm.
more of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition and beyond, where it's just all these people with powers. I'm actually more looking for these are rugged adventurers, and there's some magic, and there's some creatures and monsters and other metaphorical things that we can and challenges that are metaphorical. But mostly we are rugged adventurers putting on a backpack and deciding what we're taking with us and what we would need to survive and how we're going to work together. And we all have the same set of skills. We're just deciding what are going to be different skills that each one of us is going to take that's going to work well in the group, but also what do I need myself for my own survival or for my own upliftment? What am I going to need to take with me? So I really like that it develops the individual, but it also develops the a sense of group. And then all the way into the alternative school. Okay, now you have okay, we have project-based learning. Or even better, social emotional learning is important to us. We want to put 20% of our time or even 10% of our week on that. Great. You give over 2 hours or 4 hours. Incredible. You get them going on a journey. And I'll just say really quickly, I do 40-hour classes,
Mhm.
10 weeks for 4 hours. That would be like, a basic idea of this is a good opportunity. You could do 48 hours, you could do 64 hours, you could even do 24 hours. But the point is that you have some time to go on the adventure. This is not something where you're saying, we're going to play Dungeons and Dragons for 2 hours and that's it. because there's no expansion. I mean, even the same thing if you're trying to teach chemistry or you're trying to teach English or you're trying to teach math, you need at least 48 to 64 to 72 hours to teach geometry. You just do. You need the person to take certain ideas in,
Mhm.
have those things matriculating and processing in their mind,
Mhm.
come back to the class, try assignments, do different things, do problems, work on formulas. Again, more processing. We need time. That's how we learn. We've figured that out. We've done the research. So it's the same thing with social emotional learning. We need time to process. So it's good to have things going on for some kind of a long period of time. And then we can do things that are, let's say, a little bit more hybrid of this is a role-playing game, and now we're also trying to do certain kinds of academia within them. So in the Da Vinci
Mhm.
Life Skills curriculum, this is where we get a little bit more like that with multiverse games. We look at the psychology of games and especially introducing how do video games work and what are the algorithms around using devices and really getting kids to learn this is about the dopamine hit and this is about
Mhm.
creating not the device itself but creating apps and games and various different things, social media whose main purpose is to get you to come back, right? So learning and understanding that is very important so that they again can self-regulate. They can regulate their experience, and it isn't about us as teachers, administrators, and parents always policing them. We need to introduce those tools in a way that they can understand them. So we do that. We also have games that go through different periods of history. Greece, Rome, Mayan, ancient China. This is a great place where you can kind of, fall into a library that goes into history, and you can play in the realm or in the time. You can role play as characters in those times. So again, that's a way to take it more into literacy and using actual academic, especially social studies or history.
Mhm.
And then, as you said, all the way to the full on, okay, this is social emotional learning. We're not trying to pack stuff in there. We're not trying to take our dump truck of objectives, academic objectives and put it in there. So you can do both. There's a way of doing both.
Amazing. I'm listening to you, and again, I come to the conclusion how like overall encompassing this is because you've spoken to soft skills, which many of them are hard skills, like you said, very essential skills for any human developing, especially in those formative years. And you spoke to the academics. You mentioned math, you mentioned history, you mentioned like literacy, English and so many other things. So I'm really curious, Zach, is there any intentional, maybe standards alignment that is done for this curriculum? Because again, I'm thinking as a former public school educator, so if I really want to bring this into my classroom, then there's got to be some sort of standards alignment in order for me to be able to make room for it. Um, I wonder if that's the case, or maybe if there's an opportunity for the teacher to do it themselves, just really tie it to certain standards. What was your approach in regards to that?
Um, I think I have had the opportunity to kind of develop things, as I said, very intuitively or around schools that said, bring something in and let's make it happen. So
Mhm.
and then I've gone out and gone into the world where it's more and more rigid, and the
Mhm.
stakes are different. And
Mhm.
so um, we looked at multiverse games in terms of the UK curriculum with my partner Rosina Dorelli at Da Vinci Life Skills, and we we looked at the entire curriculum. And I give Rosina the most credit for this, but that's also her domain. But what's been really good about it is that in the UK, you have all of these different literacy skills, and they break it down into key stages. And so the main key stage, and this is a good opportunity to bring this up, 11 to 14, which in the UK is key stage 3, but 11 to 14, this is middle school around the
Mhm.
world generally. And a good
Mhm.
way to think about it is these are not quite children anymore, and they're not quite young adults either. They have not started their hormonal lives, generally speaking. So they're still really curious. They're very scientific, and even if they've gone through very difficult or challenging times in their lives, they still you can still hold something up, and they still lighten up. And they also come in every day and say, "So what do you have? What are we doing?"
Mhm.
So this is a really great entry point. So looking at the key stage in the UK and looking at, this is the state government curricula objectives. What are they in all subjects, right? And then for us in Da Vinci Life Skills, we looked at, okay, how do we put them into production, enterprise, food, personal exploration, and multiverse games? And
Mhm.
this was our objective. We've done this over the last 4 years, and we figured out and we built 2 years with those 5 project pathways. Multiverse games is 20% of it. So that's and I described that a little bit to you in terms of taking that and what that looks like in terms of a history curriculum, etc. And and then the other ones were we looked very carefully at what were all the different objectives needed to fulfill the science, the math, social studies, and especially literacy, English literacy or just having to look at all those. And I'll just again briefly say that instead of saying that, oh, we're going to get your child ready for the GCSEs or the SATs, we're not saying that. What we're saying is we will introduce your child to exactly the same material,
Mm.
but our purpose will be to introduce, engage, explore, and assess how they did with their on a life skills level. And for us, we look at 2 children who go to 2 different schools. One that goes to the regular public school with the regular rigid objectives, and the other one that goes to a project-based learning school, which, by the way, sometimes are now public schools also.
Mhm.
And when those children enter at 11 years old, one of them goes into a world of packing their brains and testing what they can remember, a lot of which we already know they are going to forget.
Mhm.
And then the other one where we introduce the same material, but in an engaging way, in a project-based learning way, in a way of puzzles and engagement. And when those 2 kids become 14 years old, we have one who is stressed out and can't believe what their road ahead looks like, and the other one who is now full of these experiences and have been introduced to them, and there's a confidence that goes with what
Mhm.
they've gone through. And so what we see, if that same child, those same 2 people wanted when they were 11 to be veterinarians, the one who has been in the school processing everything through tests is not so sure they want to do that anymore because they have another 4 years to go in high school. Then they have to go to college
Mhm.
for 4 years. Then they have to be associate, graduate, etc. So they're looking ahead at the next 8, 10, 12 years with total stress. And the other one's looking at it like an adventure. And they're thinking, what do I need to do? How am I going to make that possible? I really want to do that. But they know how to look at obstacles. They know how to fail. They know how to ask for support. This is kind of the critical difference.
Mhm. It shapes their identity in a completely different way. And,
Totally.
and that's amazing. So powerful. Zach, you mentioned failure in one of your responses, and I know you name it explicitly as one of the central teaching objectives in your work, where students experience it, they process it, and creatively reconcile with it. Why do you think modern education has become so afraid of letting children fail, and what changes when failure is reframed as part of the design?
Oof. Where did we stop letting failure happen? But I mean, failure failure happened, I think, in general, it was very competitive. And so
Mm.
we would, in the generations that led up until the beginning of the 21st century, there was a lot of competition. And um, I'm not sure that that's entirely unhealthy, but what we didn't have is we didn't have support structures. We didn't
Mm.
have a way to fail or compete. And so basically people compete all the way up and it's about winning. And Um, and then it's about whoever's failing to just get out of the way. I think what we're looking at now is everybody has a part to play. Again, this is the role play of life. Everyone has a part to play, and everybody actually will do better if they feel good about what they're doing and about what they're learning. And even some of the most successful people on this planet were people who didn't even finish school. They went out and they became entrepreneurs. So we know it's not about school. And a lot of those people left school largely because it was a toxic environment, right? And they knew that there would be something better for them, but they had the confidence somehow to go out and do it. I think what we're trying to figure out is how can we create a an environment in which you can fail and it's iterative and it's supportive. And what role-playing games does and project-based learning does is you set out with an idea of what you want to do. You create a model of what that looks like. You try something and it doesn't work. And in the case of role playing, you try to actually perform some kind of skill, or you try to do something in the story, and it doesn't go well. And instead of just falling back and thinking, "Oh, I guess this won't work," you reapproach it and you kind of try to come at it creatively from a different angle. And that's really what we're trying to teach. So iterative design is huge because
Mm.
and that's what people are doing at companies.
Mhm.
You try something, you have R&D, you have research and development. That's what they do. The person makes a proposal. They say, "Well, we think we should build, this special bike lock that's going to fit bicycles, and we need it to be low cost, and we need it to fit in a very small space, and it needs to take as many bicycles as possible," right? And it's like you're going to go through so many different iterations of what that bike lock is going to look like.
Mhm.
So that's really normal in our corporate world, right? We're just starting to introduce that from 11 to 14. And we're just saying this is the time to take those curious scientific kids and get them to try these things, because packing their brains and getting them stressed out is really uh, setting up a mental health disaster, which we are now
Mhm.
reaping. We are reaping that, and the harvest is a harvest of sorrow, and we have, and then for our whole society, we are now having to deal with, is probably the wrong way to say it, but we are challenged with trying to figure out what to do with people who have not had the right supportive environment. And we can, and so again, the conversations becomes, it's about the school, it's about the parents, it's about the kids, it's about, I mean, everybody wants to point every direction. We're just saying, look, we know what the research shows us, and it shows us we need to make the entry point earlier, because these are the skills that we know, and the World Economic Forum and so many other
Mhm.
places are saying these are the skills that people need in the job world.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
what we're realizing is that, yeah, kids are sponges, but why don't you put the things that they need to soak up are the life skills, not the academia.
Mhm. Absolutely. And thank you for mentioning the World Economic Forum. I intentionally bring the reports annually into my keynotes and workshops. So educators actually understand this is what the world needs. These are the skills that the employers are going to be asking for. And what you're speaking to, this is just practice of the skills that are very relevant in the real world, in the adult world. They're highly applicable and they are in demand. And I think the understanding this is not just about nice to have, or this is if we do what's right, this is what's going to set them up for actual conscious and authentic success in whatever path that they pursue. So thank you so much for explaining it so well. You describe, Zach, these games as screen-free and deeply immersive. And from everything that you've described, they clearly are. And this creates a space for social risk-taking, which you also spoke a lot about. You also mentioned the mental health crisis that we are currently in, particularly for youth. So, in this moment that so many teens actually retreat to screens, oftentimes to regulate. That's what I see with my own clients, and that actually, in the long run, creates more problems. What makes this tabletop format so essential and maybe to a degree revolutionary, although this is fundamentally human way to learn?
Yeah, there's an opportunity through tabletop RPGs, especially, but also in project-based learning, to do things off screen. And what we really are doing is we're modeling what it's like to spend time off screen. Actually, it could be actually that simple, which is, and especially when I say to parents, they say, "Wait, how long is your course?" It's 4 hours on a single day, and I said, "Yeah." And they're like,
Mm.
but my kid can't be away from their phone for more than 15 minutes. I say, just send them over. Like they will forget their phone. And there's methods of engagement, and I think a lot of teachers understand that. But just to be quick about it, generally the last 3 hours we play a role-playing game. But the first hour we build terrain, we paint miniatures, we do different kinds of things. Like when we say that people are going on an adventure and you're playing an adventurer who wears a backpack, and you think of all the items that they say they have in that backpack, and that they also carry a staff and a shield, and they wear armor and a helmet, and we will tabulate all that and say, so your character is carrying 55 pounds on them. Well, let's fill a backpack with 55 pounds, and let's have you run around, and we'll put stuff on them and have them wear these things and go, kinesthetically, what are you talking? You're saying that your character climbs a tree right now to look around. So they take that backpack off, right? And then how do you climb a tree with a, staff in your hand or a shield? And where do you put that? And so I think getting people to really think about, everybody's of course in soccer fever or football fever with FIFA. And I was thinking those players are on the field. They don't have anything on them but a pair of
Mhm.
shorts, shoes, shin guards, and a shirt, but they are carrying nothing else. And they're able to go as fast as they can. Their tools are in their body, and their tools are in their mind and their planning, and they're wearing cleats so they can, stop quickly and move. But otherwise, they carry nothing with them. And so getting perspective on what are you carrying with you and what do you think? The problem with video games is they'll just say, "Oh, you have something in your backpack and you can pull it out and you can do everything." And, but that simulation is not real. In fact, it's kind of silly. So that's also interesting too, is to take some perspective. It's about giving perspective. A lot of the times, it's really about how do you understand um, the world, and how do you unfold the different aspects of thinking about yourself going on an adventure or working together collaboratively in a group. I feel like did I completely answer your question, or was I setting something up there?
No, you did. You did. Yeah, thank you so much. I really want for a moment to speak about teachers because you offer training to teachers through your certification program, moving them from sort of like a space holder for this type of learning to unravel to an actual world builder and a co-designer, right? A world builder of in the multiverse. What transformation, I'm curious, do you witness in the educators, in those adults that you train, as they move through different levels of your certification, kind of unrelated, like separate from their student experience? Is there a transformation in the adults themselves once they go through your courses, through your certification process?
Absolutely. I think that they understand the implications, and also the ability, the diversity of opportunity and the diversity of understanding opportunity. So although the role-playing games have a kind of, let's say, hero's journey aspect that you can follow, you can
Mhm.
create a story and you can follow the hero's journey, and you can do things quite formulaically, but also you can freestyle and improvise on that. But also, you become aware of so many more opportunities, learning opportunities, and also that things that generally people might think of as like, oh, that's not important, for school. And again, in that kind of old world thinking, it's like the idea that somebody can play, saxophone, or that somebody likes knitting, or somebody gets really excited about ham radio, or whatever, the little thing that people nerd out on, if you can grab onto that, and I think Teacher Gamer is a way of really bringing that out in people, really
Mm,
bringing out what it is in them that's their passion. This is
mm,
like one of the real critical elements. Then there's the psychology of the game. There's learning how to, the skill set around being a, 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 a good loser and a good winner. How do you win gracefully? How do you lose gracefully?
mm,
How do
mm,
you how do you understand what it is to lose on one day and win on another day, but do it in a group, do it collaboratively, and start to celebrate the wins of others and to start celebrating other people? I think that teachers sometimes themselves, they feel siloed, they feel alone.
mm,
The other thing about Teacher Gamer that's interesting for me is that I really promote co-teaching. So I think, for example, a Spanish teacher and a history teacher, they're going to make such cool puzzles than just the single Spanish teacher or just the history teacher, right? A
mm,
biology teacher and uh, an English teacher coming together and making puzzles, that's going to be a totally different aspect.
mm,
I think that also you come away from the experience realizing that when you play with people, adult or kids, there's a different trust level that forms. 100%. Because you're playful, you try, you lose, you miss something, you try something again, you work together, you sort things out. And again, this world of metaphors, you also share inside jokes and humor, and you understand the humanity of another person or of the group in a different way, so that when you go back to the classroom and you go back to the academic setting, there's an opportunity for the person who now trusts you in a different way. Again, whether it's an adult in adult school, or it's a young person in a high school or middle school setting, where all of a sudden they will come to you in a different way and say, these letters are swimming, or these numbers are mixing, or I'm struggling to pay attention. Could you help me? And so that trust that occurs in the environment of play now transforms the relationship in the academic setting between teachers. So a teacher gamer now has this other opportunity to support. And I think also what's really interesting about that is that that's the difference between just being what we call an NPC, a non-player character, where there's this teacher who teaches this class and I got to get through that class and get the grade, and I don't really care about that teacher. But when you are now playing with that teacher, you get to know them a little bit more. And now they become somebody, they become more of a mentor. And then in the other environment, you see them in a different way. So that relationship really changes as a teacher gamer.
mm. It's like a joint exploration in your shared humanity. Like, and that's where the trust builds and everything else is just kind of blossoms from there.
Yeah.
I I know you want to bring this methodology and the program into different educational environments. And as you look forward to kind of long-term vision of bringing this to universities and accredited programs, what do you hope endures from its roots and imagination and play when it becomes more formalized? Because I think as it enters those environments, it will become more formalized. But what do you hope will endure from its roots in imagination and play? How much of it can truly be preserved in more structured settings?
That's a great question. Um, um, what will endure really is that failure piece, um,
Mm,
is that trust piece, is the empathy. Yeah, the empathy, the failure, the trust, the social emotional learning elements. These are the things that we remember our teachers for. and everybody remembers that teacher or those teachers that made a difference in their life. And it was through trust, and it was because that teacher saw us in a special way. And I believe that the teacher gamer has a much more profound opportunity to connect with youth. They're also putting themselves out a bit more, right? If you come to do a training and you come and you are literally saying, I am interested in the responsibility of social emotional learning. That is just a reality. Instead of like, I'm here to teach my subject, collect my paycheck and go. And I love the students who do really well in my class because they get what I'm trying to teach. That's one kind of teacher, but the teacher gamer is somebody who's saying, no, I really want to skill up my offer, have more in my toolkit, and whether it means that I'm a biology teacher by day, and then after school activity, I also teach role-playing games, or I also do it in camps, or it's something that you're able to actually fit directly into your school because there's the opportunity for that. This is really an opportunity to connect more. And that's what people will remember. It's about building it in a sense, kind of building your legend. You don't do it for that. You do it because you really enjoy seeing feeling the satisfaction of somebody learning. And that's the that's the real thing that will I think endure, is that this creates that opportunity.
Thank you for speaking to, I think, probably the most important thing. There's so much value in what you're offering to the world, but particularly just naturally lending to the fact, to this, the whole structure, what it invites is to be seen at a
Mm.
different level. And that's what you spoke to. I delivered a keynote to 800 educators last week, and I told my story of being seen for the first time in fourth grade by my Russian language and literature teacher. And the audience was crying because those profound human moments, that's what shapes us. And we never forget those, like you said. And so what you offer creates thousands of those moments for this deep, authentic connection, human to human. And from there, the impossible becomes possible. And with that, I want to ask you the last traditional question, which is the potentiality question. If every classroom and learning environment in the world had access to this kind of immersive, story-driven life skills education, what do you imagine becomes possible, not just for the individual children, but for how the entire generation relates to failure, empathy, and each other?
The potentiality of a an authentic education in the face of our planet going through a lot of challenges right now.
Mhm.
Um, the opportunity to understand each other, to empathize, to collaborate, to find a way to bring our skills together and to work together, understanding that we will fail together, but we will succeed together, really offers us the potential to become a multi-planet species. The potentiality here is that we are all working on the passion that comes from deep within us for whatever reason, whatever it is that drives us. It's to be seen. It's to also see each other, and uh, to witness uh, and marvel at the things that we come up with, the ingenuity and the innovation in the face of failure, in the face of challenge, that we can come together and collaborate and make a better world, but also to really clean up our act here on this planet and then branch out into the universe, where all sorts of new adventures are waiting for us, and our understanding of our humanity, where we come from, and what's next is really a marvel to behold.
Beautiful. I have nothing to add except that when I first started Potentiality, its initial description was a space of exploration for humanity that aspires to be multiplanetary.
There you go.
You are in
Well,
the right space at the right time. Thank you so much for joining me in this incredible, insightful, even intriguing, I would say, dialogue. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I'm really excited to bring this to our audiences. Zach, if people want to learn more about the work you do, reach out and bring your programs to their organization, whether it's a public school, university, after school, homeschool, where can they find you? How can they reach you?
they can reach me on LinkedIn. That's Zachary Reznichek. You can find me there. You can find a multitude of my articles just through my name and the word authentic education or role-playing games in schools. You can look up teachergamer.com. Uh, I have the Teacher Gamer Handbook is something that you can find at the website. It also can be bought at Drive-Through RPG, as well as Teacher Gamer Handbook is where I post pictures and videos of what I get up to and the different workshops that are offered on Instagram. But yeah, I'm out there on the socials, and it's very easy to get in touch with me. And please reach out. You can also book a little chat with me at teachergamer.com on in my calendar. And I love to hear from anybody and hear what people are exploring.
Thank you so much for sharing all those resources. We will make sure that all of them are available in the description box below this video. Thank you so much, Zach. My only wish is that every child in the world gets to experience this type of learning because that will set them on a completely different trajectory, which will eventually set the humanity on a completely different trajectory that many of us are still dreaming about, but we don't see how it can realistically become possible. And I think this is one of the avenues to make it very real in the very near future. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I, I'm going to also say I didn't mention, but I want to put in there if you have a chance or you would like to look at the more robust curriculum to check us out at davincilifeskills.com as well. So if project-based learning is something that people are interested in adapting to their school, either in little pieces or in full, that's a great place to begin. And we have a 70 skill assessment um, system and all sorts of new things that we've developed there as well. And that's production, enterprise, personal exploration, food, and multiverse games.
Thank you so very much once again. We will make sure we'll provide all those details. And I can't thank you enough for sharing this space with me today. And I look forward to seeing this grow and be very successful, and for our children and youth having access to this type of education. And I'm happy to support in any way that I can. Thank you so, so much again.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you again for highlighting what we're all trying to do and bring so much more opportunity for life skills in kids and to build that confidence and make them adult ready.
Thank you, Zach. And thank you for joining us today. I am grateful to each one of you who tuned into today's session, and I sincerely hope you found it insightful and valuable. Please remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet to never miss an episode. I will see you next time.